Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Jury Fall Day and what we hope will be an informative opportunity for you to learn more about what our community partners are doing as they're planning events during COVID. Before I get started and introduce you to today's panelist and moderator, I did want to go over a few housekeeping items for you. Just to let everyone know, you will be muted for the entirety of this educational event today. If you have any questions that you would like to pose to today's panelists, you can do so by entering your question in the questions box, and then our staff will be monitoring that box and they will make sure that we get those questions answered for you. Additionally, following this educational event, there will be an email sent out with a recording of today's webinar. And so if you would like to go back and listen to the webinar, you can do so. Additionally, we'll have some resources as well as contact information for the panelists. So if you have questions or want to connect with them following the webinar, you can do so. So without further ado, I will introduce you to today's moderator, Angela Hammond with Experience Columbus.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Planning During the Pandemic, the Future of Events. The events industry has been severely impacted during this pandemic, and we are experiencing the full range of emotions as we go about our days. But we continue to demonstrate grit in the face of extraordinary disruption and uncertainty. Today, I'm joined with members from various sectors of the events world to discuss how they are navigating planning events during the current conditions, the future of events post-COVID, and the precautions we can take to encourage attendees to join in person. So first, we'll start by introducing John Page. John is a general manager for the ASM Global Managed Greater Columbus Convention Center, where he oversees all daily operations, stakeholder relationships, and business development for the award-winning 1.8 million square foot convention center. Serving in his position since 2013, John is a certified tourism ambassador and Smart Business Columbus Smart 50 honoree. He was recently named to be a member of the Responsible Restart Ohio Travel and Tourism Advisory Group by Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, where he served as the chair of the Meetings and Convention subgroup. So, welcome, John. Next, we have Sherry Johnson. Sherry is the VP of Knowledge and Business Development for American Hort, the National Association for the Green Industry, where she has worked in various roles for more than a decade. Today, she leads the team responsible for the execution of events from Cultivate, the industry's premier trade show and conference that attracts more than 10,000 attendees from across the globe and generates millions of dollars in revenue, to smaller, more intimate events, to this year's online virtual events. Sherry has extensive event planning experience, holding several certifications, including her Certified Event Management certification from the International Association of Exhibitions and Events, and her Certified Meeting Planner credentials from the Convention Industry Council. So welcome, Sherry.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, Jerry Spencer is the Vice President and Senior Account Executive at Bartha and currently serves as a company shareholder. Jerry has been in the audiovisual production business for 32 years and just celebrated his 25th year at Bartha. Jerry plays a strategic role in Bartha's business development and client relationships with a thorough understanding of all sides of the event business, from the creative to the technical. In all of those years, he has lived many AV lives, from a rental equipment driver to a technician, project manager, producer, and finally, his current role in growing Bartha into a nationally recognized event production company. So welcome, Jerry. So we have a lot to cover, and we've gotten a lot of great questions, so we will just dive right in. And John, I'm going to kick it off with you. Okay. Do you feel it is safe for people to attend in-person events right now? And how can we encourage more people to do so?
Short answer is absolutely. And I said you can call me at 614-827-2500, and I look forward to booking your next event. But in all seriousness, I think it's one, Angela, of education. it's education, and it's marketing the fact that venues such as the convention center, and obviously we're an anomaly in many ways because we're the ultimate social distancing facility at 1.8 million square feet. We can bring people in and effectively distance out, but the gathering number is still the gathering number 300. So be it this facility or be it a hotel venue or otherwise, those mandates are what they are. But I think importantly is just understanding that venues are open. I would venture to say, if I were to do a survey of the attendees on this call, maybe 40 to 50% think that we're still set up as a surge hospital. So that's a constant communication I get from the convention center side. Aren't you guys a hospital? But we are open. We are open and active. So I think, again, it's educating and kind of the marketing is part of that. It's supporting initiatives in place, such as the Ohio Travel Association, Ohio Hotel Lodging Association Safe Return to Meetings and Events. So understanding that and being supportive of those initiatives that are in place in front of the governor, in front of the Ohio Department of Health, to be able to get back to doing meetings and events.
Which we all want to do because we're spending way too much time in this virtual world. Speaking of that, Jerry, Zoom calls and virtual meetings are the default these days. How can we make virtual events more enticing for people to attend when so many are complaining of that Zoom fatigue?
Well, yeah, it's definitely Zoom fatigue and screen fatigue, overall. So one of the things I think you can do is we know for a fact is establish clear objectives. So make sure that everyone that's going to be involved knows what they're going to be talking about, what the presentation is. So establishing clear objectives and a very detailed summary or agenda at the beginning of the session is very key to that. So again, that way people know what they're getting into, what they need to be prepared for when they get on. The other thing is, like we're here today, we're in our offices, everybody's at their office, they have a background. If you can originate from a studio of some point, make it feel more like a broadcast instead of just another Zoom or Teams meeting or whatever it is, whatever platform it's on. Make it feel like a broadcast almost, to where they're not just on a Zoom meeting, but maybe they're watching television, so more of a broadcast feel certainly helps. Or even a background, like a lot of people have virtual backgrounds. Some look bad if you don't have a green screen behind you. So establishing a different maybe environment. So as you're having, especially if you're the presenter and you're presenting, make it feel more, I guess, a little bit more professional. Shorter meeting times, nothing longer than 30 to 45 minutes in one stretch. Build in breaks for people. And do something fun during the break, bring in a yoga, or, even if nothing else, you're sharing your screen, run a slideshow and put some music up during the break. So people can feel, like, hey, I'm almost like in a live event scenario where you take a break, you go to the restroom, you talk to someone, something's happening. So, make it fun, make it entertaining almost. So, the other thing, during your presentation, good, interesting visuals are obviously key. The chat function, make that fun, but not too fun. You can do some polling. There's gamification things that you can do where people can earn points. There's certain ways they can do things or do different tasks to earn points. And then keeping keynotes at a faster and shorter pace, like a TED Talks type presentation. And then the last thing that I have is actively call on the attendees for Q&A and let them know that they're being heard. So you're not just speaking at them, but they are actually interacting with you, is very important as well.
That's great information. I think you've touched on this in kind of wrapping up the most effective ways to engage those attendees during a virtual meeting. So is it really just using the Q&A, or is there an opportunity for them to be visible and active as well?
There's a way for them, yeah, depending on what platform you're using, like a Zoom or, a Teams or this GoToMeetings. It depends on how, like if it's a webinar style or if you're really in a meeting. So like what we're in today is more of a webinar style where there's a panel and then there's an audience. So there's two different sides. So if you go into more of a Zoom type meeting to wherever you can do the gallery view, there's also ways where you can spotlight people. So someone might be able to raise their hand with a question, and then like we have a control room here. So then from our control room, we can spotlight that person and then bring them to the screen. So just different ways of doing it, but it's always best if they can be seen. They feel like they're more engaged.
Absolutely. So Sherry, let's talk more about the planning side. What is your top priority for planning events in 2021 and the coming years?
Oh, Angela, that's a really good question. I would say that really the name of the game, first and foremost, is flexibility. If we've learned anything from this year, it's so very important to be flexible. So certainly continuing that flexibility in the years to come. From a planning perspective, making sure that we have multiple plans in place so that we have a very quick reaction whenever it's needed, depending on what is going on, in the world, and making sure that we can do that from an execution perspective as well. Our team has always been very good at having backup plans and such, but really this pandemic has, just drove that home even more. A couple other things that are, of course, top of mind is just having the right relationships and working with our partners in ensuring that we can have an influence or at least bring some sort of guidance to what the state guidelines are, what the officials are looking for, especially when it comes to events of our size in the city. We want to ensure that our partners know that they can count on us, on our voice, because we definitely want to have our event, and our attendees want to be there. Also focusing on partnering with everyone in the hospitality industry, as well as event industry, but just on reopening plans, sharing any information we have so we can all work together, because I think that's the key, is just all of us working together, no matter, what company you're working for. It's one big team to be able to pull these events off. Of course, safety precautions are top of mind, really taking a look at what is going to be needed to make sure that our attendees feel safe, to make sure that the city is demonstrating that it's safe. There's great guidelines put in place and safety precautions. And then, of course, from an event perspective, making sure that we're fulfilling all of those guidelines that are set, and then also ensuring that they feel safe to come to the event, so that, we'll make sure that we have the attendance. And then the other thing that I would say that, we're really focusing on for 21 and then in the future is just the budgets. It's definitely a different game right now when we're looking at budgets. Things have had to shift. There's certainly been cuts that have needed to be made, and then also trying to come up with that additional revenue to put some of those safety measures in place. It's going to be challenging for event planners in the future to make sure that, they can be flexible with that, because it could change, and you want to be available and ready to make sure your event happens, and you can go with the flow. I would say those are our top priorities right now.
Certainly sums it up, and partnership and communication is certainly key as we navigate this together. So John, you said you are open, which is fabulous. So what types of in-person events are being planned and hosted right now?
Only those that fall within the attendance guidelines. So I want to make sure everyone understands that. So, but in all seriousness, the main thrust of where we saw initially, sort of as many people know, we're hosting as an annex courthouse right now for the Franklin County Municipal Court. So the convention center has been serving in that role since June of hosting traffic and eviction cases. But separate of that, there were those things that were allowed right away from the Responsible Restart Ohio program. So initially we saw a lot of non-contact sports. We were doing dance and things of that nature. Even yoga is one we've done recently. And then some of the contact sports came around where we're allowed to be able to go forward with those. And then it became those items from a food and beverage, standpoint of understanding once those requirements were allowed and having those type of banquet-based events to a certain maximum number of 300 people, but there had to be a food and beverage component. And really that has become the major thrust of what we're doing. And that has allowed us to do everything from, we did a nursing college graduation a few weeks back, and we've done some events with Amazon in this short term, kind of time period, and some others along that horizon to have that banquet functionality kind of towards it. But again, kind of in summary, it's again ensuring that we're looking at what the operating requirements are and only being able to do it up under kind of those standpoints. I think there's also another way, if you look at it too, is if your guidelines are at 300, how can you, or making sure that not only you're at that number or below, but maybe you can be creative with that and work back with your planner to have multiple event phases or sessions within a given day, all to ensure that you're still at that number of 300, but then you're just chopping up, let's say, an event for 900 people, and you're doing it in phases of 3 is another way that we work with some of our groups.
That's a great idea. Maximize those numbers, but still in a safe way.
Yep.
So you talked about staying within those guidelines. So what are some protocols that are being taken into account at in-person events to be effective? And are there any protocols that you've learned along the way that you've improved on from hosting some of those smaller events?
Well, I think safety is always, I mean, the main determinant in our industry. I mean, so again, our maximum kind of job is to make sure that we're keeping our attendees, our customers, our guests safe in our facilities. The venues themselves, they can go away. You can replace a venue, but you can't replace the people who are inside the venue. So safety has always been first and foremost within our industry, and even more so now. And then having those requisite programs related to both safety, hygiene, cleanliness, and those aspects. Now, I won't bore you all about the wonderful Greater Columbus Convention Center program we have here called Venue Shield. So call me later. I'll tell you all about that program. But as far as the items, and we look at that and going through this phase as we reopen, there, you're looking at the things such as temperature checks, and you're looking at the contact tracing elements, and you're looking at how you bring people in and out for events. And again, doing that in small numbers has allowed us to be able to best understand, kind of that right template as we get back into doing the larger events, because many of those things we know are going to remain. One thing I counsel my staff on every day is we're not going to suddenly go from 300-person events to 3,000. But what we're doing right now is we're going to school, and we're going to school and understanding how to best go about that, to best understand what that customer journey needs to look like, to best understand how we need to be out in front of ensuring even more so what we're doing from an optimum, kind of level as far as what our best practices, kind of may be. So.
That's great feedback. Thanks so much. So Sherry, what are the main struggles you are feeling in today's event industry?
Oh, wow. One aspect of it is we certainly look at all of our partners and identify with all the struggles they have and what they're going through, and try to look at that and learn from that how we can adjust to make whatever challenges they have, whether it's a staffing restriction, something of that nature, to make sure that we can help them be as successful so that we can have the events. We do events all over the nation. So one of the challenges we've really faced was just being able, as most of our staff is based here in Ohio, just being able to stay on top of what the state guidelines are within each state. We actually have our fall event that we're hosting next week, and that is actually turned into a virtual conference now, but that was going to be in Colorado. So it's just managing those relationships from afar, and then also just keeping, because as you guys know, some of these guidelines can change daily, even multiple times daily. So, that's been challenging, I would say, for sure. Also, I think a big thing that we've really been struggling with, and I think a lot of event planners is moving your event to virtual. So we did that for Cultivate, and I can say definitely it was very successful. All of our attendees were so thrilled that we did something, because so many events within our industry, the green industry, had been canceled and postponed. So they were just happy to have something and to have an opportunity to learn from an educational standpoint, and then also some form of a platform, even though it was virtual, to do some business to business, that type of functions. The challenging part, though, is really trying to help people stay engaged, and Jerry just spoke to some of those things. And I know within the green industry, they are really big people. They want to, they're the huggers. They're the, so it's definitely been challenging to bring them together and make it be beneficial for everyone. But I think we've done a good job navigating that so far. I see in the future there's some great pros to the virtual events that we've learned from, that I think we will absolutely follow through with in the future events that we have. But certainly those challenges have been a little tough for sure.
Absolutely. So, Sherry, what steps can the hospitality community take in helping to encourage groups to return to in-person meetings and events? What are you needing to see from us?
So we have a great relationship with the Columbus hospitality community. I would say some things we've learned is certainly just the sharing of communication from what your reopening plans are, what safety precautions and steps you're taking, that sort of thing has been really great. And I think all event planners need to have that strong of relationships so that they can work together and really be able to communicate to the attendees, what they can expect, what steps are being taken by the hotels, by the convention center, and by the city. I would say, if anything, I think the city could certainly promote some of those safety, and that it's a safe place to come. You can come to Columbus and have a safe meeting here, and these are all the guidelines, and so I think that would be a really great benefit for meeting planners to be able to share with their attendees to help them feel safe and comfortable in attending events.
That's great feedback. We definitely all need to feel that confidence that we're going to be safe where we go, and that we can meet safely as a group. So I'm going to throw this question out for all of you to weigh in on. What has been your biggest takeaway, and what have you learned from the changes brought on by the pandemic that will take us forward into the future?
I'll start. Yeah, I can start. We now know that virtual meetings and events can work. They have worked. We all want to get back to live events. Believe me, we do, and we know everybody does. But at the same time, we know that virtual is here to stay as well. Once we do get back to live events, there's going to be some sort of virtual component to it. So when that happens, it's really going to be more important than ever to make sure that the virtual audience is getting the same experience and feels the same engagement that the people that are live, that are there. So, and we're already starting to see some of that into next year, where we've got some of our clients are like, we're going to need to do a hybrid event. How are we going to get the online audience to get the same, feeling, and the same feeling of engagement that the people that are, on site are going to have? So that's going to be a challenge, and one that we're ready to take head on, and helping to make that happen. So, people that are online feel like they're there. So there's a few ways to do that. There's ways that we can put monitors up in the space, in the convention space, with Facebook or YouTube comments, where people can post, people at home can post things where the people online, on site can see that, and vice versa. So, the presenter to address the online audience, and just making them feel like they're part of the overall convention, because if they don't, they're not going to come back. So it's going to be very, very important to make sure your virtual audience feels the same love that the on-site people do.
Ladies next, Sherry, please.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
I actually was going to just talk a little bit about one of the takeaways that I really value from this past year that we've gone through, and that's teamwork, and just how important it is to show your staff how much you value them, the hard work that they do. And I think that above all, it takes a team, whether it's just your internal staff or a community, to get through things. And I think this is a perfect example of that. And I think the panel you put together was a great example of, we all work together well, and we produce great events. And I think that that's key, is that teamwork.
I guess I'll conclude with the elephant in the room, is that, we're at that new norm in many ways as we head forward. So that's one aspect of that, and having to embrace that. And I think, in the beginning for us all, it became a challenge to be able to do so in different, kind of ways, because we know what our industry is. It is one of bringing people together and to be able, I think as Sherry pointed out, that we're huggers, we're intimate, we want to, you know, kind of be in each other's physical space. And as we look forward and kind of a lesson learned, you know, while that's going to occur and we are going to get back to doing the kind of business and when there's a pent up demand as part of that, there's going to be some differences, you know, kind of as part of that. And so I think as, you know, speaking from the venue side of having those things optic wise that can show and understand that will give a great sense to comfort level, you know, kind of to our visitors, our guests, our attendees, you know, for our events. And that may be some of the requisite things like distancing at a certain type of level will still be there. Maybe if the mask eventually kind of go away, you know, whether it's, you know, kind of the temperature checks at some level and kind of what that may be, and having the requisite machinery in place, or things like UV lighting on escalator, you know, kind of handles, and you get to some of the cleaning aspects that will do because of those areas that you're touching on and on a regular basis. Doing event operational type plans and working back with the customers to understand both what their safety plans are and then what your plans are as a venue of doing that. Buffets is always the one when you look at from a food and beverage, you know, kind of standpoint, and, you know, more than likely those are going to be hosted going forward. So again, just those things like that, you know, kind of looking at as you move forward into the future. But it's a future that's bright. It's a future that's going to have us coming back to doing events, and we're going to be stronger as an industry, you know, kind of coming out of this COVID pandemic.
Absolutely. So I think we've all said we're ready for in-person events. What do we really think the future moving forward it is going to look like? Do we all agree it's going to be in-person, virtual, or most likely a hybrid of the two?
I think a hybrid for sure. There's certainly some pros and cons that we have learned from doing virtual events this year. And we've really received some great feedback that a lot of our members were able to share the education that they learned because it was hybrid, or I'm sorry, because it was virtual. So I see that need moving in the future, because just from business to business, there can be different challenges of sending people to face-to-face events. And I think that will help be able to meet our members' needs if we're doing hybrid events at some level.
Right. I would agree. I mean, I think it's mastering hybrid. I mean, so particularly, I think, again, owning that, mastering how you can do it better than anyone else, being creative along those lines. A lot of what Jerry talked about in the beginning, maybe, you know, those become studios that are kind of designed in many ways within venues such as mine that can give you kind of a leg up kind of on your competition in doing so. But yeah, I think hybrid's here to stay at some base level as we go forward in the immediate short term.
Yeah, I agree. That's what we're preparing for. We know it's going to be both, and you know, we as much as anybody want to get back to doing live events and trucking equipment everywhere and all that. But I think what we're going to be looking at is looking at the space, you know, and being, like as I mentioned earlier, bringing the virtual audience in and making them feel like they're part of the live audience there, and that could be through, you know, like a coffee bar where there's monitors set up, you know, to where, you know, on-site attendees can be chatting with someone that's virtual, you know, so things like that, you know, more like kiosk type things to where you're bringing all the attendees together, and they can talk with someone that was a presenter that they just saw in a breakout session. You know, they can talk to them over a Zoom meeting or whatever. So there's going to be a lot of that. So the way, you know, the typical general session, breakout rooms, and trade show is going to be the whole other aspect is going to be a whole virtual space, you know, or hybrid space, or whatever we want to call it, that brings all of the attendees of the event together in one place, so they can interact and network, because they are huggers, you know, so they can virtually hug.
Yes, we need those hugs. Well, as Jerry said, good practice is we have to engage our audience. So we appreciate all the questions we received in advance, but now's the time for you to ask any additional questions you have. So please submit those in the chat. We've had a couple come through already. So Aaron is asking, has anyone devised a class or instructional video for event planners to learn to produce a virtual event? Or is there one that you recommend? There's some good tools out there.
Oh, that's you, Jared.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, there's especially with the virtual event platforms that are out there, the ones where, you know, it's really a website where, you know, and Sherry knows this, where you go in and you have your entire convention online. There's a lot of good tools out there and FAQ pages and best practices pages that talk to you about how to get the most out of a virtual event. So, you know, the specific platform that we use, there's a whole onboarding document to where this is how it's going to work. You know, whether you're a presenter, an exhibitor, or an attendee or a speaker or whatever, this is how it's going to work. This is the process of how it goes, you know, as we get into this. So, you know, obviously engaging with someone like a production company, whoever you work with, to help guide you through that. But yeah, there's a lot of tools out there, and it mainly exists with the platforms that do that sort of thing.
So reach out to your ED company is what you're saying to get
Sure.
get that platform.
Absolutely.
So John, what
Yeah.
and when is the next large event that will be happening at the Greater Columbus Convention Center?
How do you define large? So I'll say on paper for us, that'll be the annual Ohio Star Ball competition taking place in November. And the event's going to look a lot different for those that are familiar with the Star Ball than it has in the past, and everything from how the retail portion of that event has worked in the past, where that's out in the public concourse space, that will be a contained space with so many people allowed in to do the requisite shopping, to the actual dance competitions within themselves, which would be requisite based upon the number of spectators rather, that you can have in one given period of time. As I've learned throughout this course, both from my work on the Responsible Task Force and having to study those guidelines really every day, because again, they change oftentimes on what you can do, is that you're not limited on the number of athletes or competitors. Your limitation comes on the number of spectators. And so again, we're going to have, and I'm not sure where the final numbers are going to end up on dancers for the competition, but I know it's going to be less than what they've been historically. But we will be capping the number of spectators in throughout multiple dance sessions throughout the day. But that takes place third week of November here at the Greater Columbus Convention Center.
Yes, we are excited to welcome them to the city. To be a great testimonial how you can safely bring groups together. Someone's asking if we can dive a little deeper on hybrid events. So I don't know, Sherry, have you done an actual hybrid event, or have yours been fully virtual?
No, ours so far this year have been fully virtual. We are looking at adding a hybrid component, if you want to call it that, for Cultivate 21. But we're really, right now, we're just looking at how we would provide some education online if we were to do that. That could be also be happening at the event. And then a couple other aspects to it. We haven't dug really deep into the planning of what the hybrid part, could look like. And I think that there's so many things that are coming out all the time now that will help us, make that determination. And we partner with Jerry, and, they have great ideas as well. So I think we'll be able to do that in July of next year. But unfortunately, we haven't had the opportunity to do anything face-to-face this year.
Jerry and John, do you have any examples of hybrid ones you've actually produced?
Okay, yeah, I just say we've been doing hybrid for years. I mean, as far as, it's been leading with the live event because, we've all been doing live events for a while, long time, but we've been streaming them out and, making them accessible to an online audience through streaming and, where people that were watching the stream could ask questions over a Q&A or a chat function in the streaming. So it's been going on for years really already. So taking it to the next level now, as we move in, we have not actually done a hybrid event through the pandemic yet, but we're already quoting and looking at a lot of them that, not early, but mid to late next year. And it's just a lot more involved. So, instead of just streaming a general session out, it's going to become more where it's in the event platform for the online user, and then the event app for the on-site user. So those two things need to mesh. So, typically you've had Sherry, you've probably had an event app for years. They go on their phone, they see what their schedule is, and then they walk to their next breakout. So now that's going to become even more important to have the app and the virtual event platform in complete alignment. So, the attendee, no matter if they're at their computer, or if they're walking down, the convention center foyer, they're doing the same thing. So, and the same set of breakout sessions or trainings or whatever are available to both, and they're both getting the same experience. I know one where we're looking at sending out packages to people at home. So, it might, people that are there, they're getting all the benefits of being there. So the ones that aren't there, they're going to get a cool care package in the mail. And then it could become some sort of gamification to where, hey, I got one of these. And, so then you can chat with people that are on site as to what you got or what they got or whatever. So there's a lot of different ways, but, as I mentioned earlier, really going to have to work very hard to engage your online audience.
Absolutely. I love that idea of getting a gift at home.
Angela.
Angela, yeah. Go ahead, Sharon.
I was just going to add one thing, that one concern that I've talked to other event planners about as well is just, it's a fine line of how great do you make that look, because you still want the attendees to attend your in-person event, obviously, if it's the right atmosphere and everything that we're able to, put together. But I think that's a very fine line too, of making sure, you don't take one from the other. So just a thought there.
Angela, if I can just add real quick to the hybrid discussion, only because it's very unique how it went about. The convention center has done one, but I would venture to say it was the very first one in the pandemic, and it was for the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Compensation Safety Congress, which took place the week after the Arnold Sports Festival. And so I think, as everyone on the call here knows, is we were the epicenter really for when the pandemic truly hit Columbus, when the Arnold Sports Festival was closed down. The Bureau of Workers' Compensation followed the week after. And so it became a point of necessity with such a short time frame to be able to obviously understand that they wouldn't be able to host their event because their event is 8,000 people. And so it became a virtual, a hybrid setup at that period of time, where their keynote speaker was Anthony Munoz, the NFL Hall of Famer from the Cincinnati Bengals. And so he was here on site as well as some of the other speakers, but obviously the bulk of the attendees at that point were off site. So just a note there, just because, again, the unique situation that happened right when the pandemic was first coming upon us here in Central Ohio, where a group who was too late for them to say, hey, we're going to cancel, quickly pivoting within a 5-day time period to do a hybrid event.
Talk about teamwork and flexibility there to pivot in that short of time frame. That's a great success story. Back to Melissa's original question about instructional videos. Barry offered up some good advice, which I should have been aware of. PCMA offers the Digital Event Specialist certification, which actually several people on the Experience Columbus team is currently taking, so highly recommend that. And then MPI offers a virtual event and meeting management certificate. So those industry partners are stepping up and meeting that need for education in this area. So check that out for more information. Melissa is asking, are there any good ideas for engaging customers in virtual exhibit halls? A lot of our exhibitors have said they have not gotten good leads or sales from virtual exhibit halls. And I can speak from experience on this one. We hosted ASAE in Columbus last year, and then this year had to turn around and be in a virtual booth, which just wasn't the same. We certainly had people stop by to see us that we already had those relationships with, and still complimenting us from last year, but certainly was not that level of engagement that you would want. So have you seen good ideas out there to improve upon?
I can give you some feedback that we had from exhibitors and things they tried, to create that engagement. The gamification aspect of online is, I don't think it's as easy for people to participate as it sounds. I think they get bored very quickly with it and move on, so I think not having that aspect complicated would help. And then I think having that interaction point of maybe it's a live demo that the exhibitor is doing at a certain time, and making sure that they're promoting it so that everyone's aware that they're doing a live demo on whatever their product is. I think that's really, really important to create that engagement. And then the last thing that I got a ton of feedback on from attendees was just, if you're an exhibitor, make sure that you're responding to people that are stopping in your booth, because I think for us, our exhibitors had never even, half of them didn't even get online, from that nature. A lot of it really pivoted for them, and they had to jump in, head first. but a lot of them didn't realize how much work it was really going to be. And I think that's important if you're going to be an exhibitor in that world, is you really should dedicate your time to that and make sure that you're able to react and ask questions and try to create that engagement. Even if you just see someone stopping by and they haven't, asked a question, initiate that, just as you would in person. That's the feedback I got.
That's
I don't know
great.
if that's
And we
helpful.
noticed that during ASAE, it wasn't just at booth hours. We had to be attentive and available while they all were
Mhm.
skipping their sessions to explore or multitask.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it too, is having really in a virtual event platform, having specific times to where they can go to the booths. And I know with the platform we use, it's got a 3D model type look to it. So when they click in, it looks like a real trade show hall. It's 3D, and then you can look and go, oh, there's so and so company, and then they can click on it, and then it opens up that booth, and then they can click to select and to have a meeting with them like this. So they can have that personal interaction with them, but having it really maybe at specific times to where they're available and can speak with them. And then I know a lot of the reporting on the back end, at least in the one that we use, is very good. Even if someone stopped by but you didn't have a conversation with them, you still get a whole list of everybody that even just clicked into your booth. So I know it's not the same as being there live, but at least in the platform we're using, there's some pretty good tools to know who was there and who at least looked at you.
So Lynette is asking, how are sponsors responding to a virtual or hybrid event in terms of impressions? Are you still getting the same sponsor interaction, Sherry?
I would say we are, to an extent. I wouldn't say it's the same, but we definitely have interest and have been able to execute sponsorship. So there's definitely that component that's available. I do think it has to be the right fit for people and companies. So it really depends on what their product is and who they're trying to reach and how difficult, executing their product and their messaging. And then also I think another important thing is just how strong do they already have a presence online? Because that's one thing I found working with sponsors for Cultivate 20 was if they already had a very strong social media presence and a very strong website and things of that nature, it was much easier for them to, sign up and to be all in for it. And then we had, a pretty good amount in our industry that didn't really have a lot of engagement in that area. So they were very shy about, if they were going to do something on site, they absolutely would be doing it. But they were very shy about it. And I had to do a lot of talking to get them, on board with it. And they weren't disappointed. They felt that they received the value that they were looking for. But again, it's a lot of work to get that value. So a lot of follow-up, was required after the event on their behalf, just to make sure that they were keeping that door open for those future sales that they could get.
Another question we had was, how has the process been going working with local and state health officials to get COVID safety plans for events approved? Any tips or feedback you'd be willing to share? So actually the team at Experience Columbus, in conjunction with the Convention Center and OHLA, we're really working to try to get a mitigation plan put together that we can take to the health department and those city leaders and help walk the planner through what information we need to present to get it approved. So that is really, we've got a great framework built. We haven't gotten to actually use it on a group, but hoping to do soon. And I'm sure American Hort is going to be part of that process with us. But John, I don't know if you want to touch further your role on the task force regarding this subject.
And I'll hit a couple of things within it. Yes, Angela. I think the first piece to answer the question back is, and you hit upon a key piece. You can't do it in a silo. You can't go to the state, the city, the county, whoever it may be, by yourself. So you need to make sure you're doing it in collaboration with your venue, with the bureau if necessary, depending upon the size of the event. And so one of the things going from my role within kind of the task force, but I've also been asked to aid other convention centers throughout the state on some items, as I found out in other kind of destinations, Cleveland, Dayton, Akron, you name it, that there were a lot of groups who were just going to the state to try to get plans approved and weren't going through their convention center or their DMO partners. So that's the first piece I would say is don't try to do it alone. The second step is, again, as you noted, is being able to make sure you've got the requisite information there when that time comes. At the convention center, as I've noted, we've been hosting events since June. We have not had to go to the state yet for any kind of variance or any kind of approval because we've figured out our lane needs to be that 300 or less. Is that, you know, at this point, let's take the business that we have, let's specialize in what we have. And again, some of that has kind of manifested itself because, again, those groups who are large in that aren't able to meet anyway. So it's not a case of someone wanting to meet to say, hey, can you work with us and try to work with your state to have a variance for this event? Because the optics are what they are, the reality is what it is. And so we really haven't had that case happen yet. And hopefully by the time Sherry comes to see me in July, we are much past where we are right now. And it's a very easy process to host her thousands of attendees here at the convention center. So.
Sure.
I think this is the last piece, I'm sorry, Angela, from the state piece is getting towards an occupancy number has always been a goal. And so looking at kind of the role that I played there and kind of chairing, you know, kind of group, and the joke I always give is that I did a terrible job apparently because there's been no movement. They put me in charge and so we're right where we were when we began.
Yeah.
But yeah, but in all seriousness, the ask that we had from, you know, kind of the task force is don't put an arbitrary number there, particularly a number that stays in place, but make it an occupancy percentage. And so that way, even though Columbus is the largest convention center in the state, then that number on percentage could be anywhere. Because right now, the convention center at 1.8 million square feet is the same size as a 100-room hotel. Again, that's not a balance. You can have the same number of people in there, and it shouldn't be judged that way. It should be judged based upon an occupancy number of the relative space kind of going forward. And if that needs to raise or lower, at least you have a percentage versus a number, be it 10 or 300.
Couldn't agree with that more. And it's definitely an education process, just like most of us have to explain to our friends and neighbors what we do for a living. It's getting that understanding out about what it takes for our events to happen.
Right.
So I think that wraps up all the questions we've had for today. So I want to thank the panelists for their time and the great questions the audience submitted. I believe we're all anxious to get back to in-person events in a safe manner, and we will continue to work together to make that happen.
Yes, and I'm back on and just wanted to thank everyone again and just let you know there will be a recording of this. So if you want to listen back and hear all the great tips that the panelists provided for us today, or even share the information with your colleagues, we will be sending that out via email after this, so you'll have it. So thank you again, everyone. Enjoy your Halloween, whatever is to come with that this evening and this weekend, and enjoy your weekend. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.